and poskim, and together with a very, very deep Masorah and a total recall of a most amazing wide range of knowledge in Torah. At the same time, an extremely practical approach to paskening halacha. Rabbi Hershel Schachter has been a prominent Marbitz Torah, ladies and gentlemen, for over half a century. So during that time, tens of thousands of Talmidim and Talmidei Talmidim and children of Talmidim have been nourished and have been directed and guided by his Piskei Halacha and Divrei Torah. And to have him here this evening with us is absolutely a wonderful privilege. Let me say a couple of words about how this event came to be. There is a group was formed only a few months ago by Dr. Elisha Cohen from Hendon, who you might know, which is called Torat Harefuah. And this group, it's important I'm giving you this introduction to the group because it's relevant to the whole goal of this evening. And this group was designed to give Rabbonim and educators access to senior Dayanim and Rabbonim and experts in the medical field. I think Rabbonim have come to the awareness, I think, over quite a few years. I know in my life, quite a few years, but particularly as we are at the moment in the middle of the biggest global health crisis in our generation, that new issues are being raised all the time, which require a very, very high level of expertise, both in medicine and in halacha. And there are very few Rabbonim who actually have that level themselves of that combined knowledge. And therefore, what started off really as a WhatsApp group of Rabbonim and doctors and senior physicians and senior Dayanim and poskim has really become a tremendous resource for the Rabbonim worldwide, and courtesy of WhatsApp and Zoom, we are able really to reach far beyond what would normally otherwise be possible. And this evening is one such example, that we have someone of the caliber of Rav Hershel Schachter with us, able to address some of these questions. One of the particular questions that always interested me, which I think Rav Schachter possibly will address, is the big picture of what is really the relationship between rabbis and doctors. Rabbis and doctors often have to team up together in order to make a decision, because neither of them alone can do it. They can only do it as a team. But that teamwork is not always quite so simple. I know certainly in my life, I've had to consult doctors quite often before giving a Halakhic ruling on end-of-life issues or on nida issues or on other complicated Halakhic medical issues. And I sometimes got the sense that the doctor might know medical facts, but the doctor doesn't always share my values. Now, you might not think that's relevant because medicine is about scientific facts, but that's not quite true, because to make a decision, one needs to know also the values which are being represented by that decision. And that's often an issue between doctors and rabbis, which I think needs a bit of clarification. Baruch Hashem, we're able to teach Torah worldwide at the moment. I just want to maybe just mention very briefly, since I've been given the mic for extra 2 or 3 minutes, something which struck me. I was discussing with someone recently about a psak halacha that you find in the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah. And the Rambam writes in Hilchos Talmud Torah, based on a Gemara in Chulin Kuf Lamed Gimel, that ein melamdin Torah letalmid she'eino hogun, that one doesn't actually teach Torah to everybody, that a person has to be of a certain level in terms of his emunah and his ashkafas and midas in order to teach him Torah. So the Rambam says, if you are confronted with somebody who is not a worthy recipient of Torah, you have to first machzirin oso l'tshuva. You have to bring him back to tshuva, and then only you can teach him Torah. And but this is actually quite a contested issue in the famous story in Brachas Kafches, where Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was deposed as Nasi, and they took away the Shema, the guard at the entrance, who was clearly filtering who was allowed into the Beis HaMedrash on the basis of who was Hogun and who wasn't Hogun, who was Teichei Kabara and who wasn't. At the end of the story was that they got rid of that Shema and added 400 rows of seats. And the conclusion of that Gemara seems to be that teaching Torah should be open to everybody, should be democratized and not just an esoteric group. Yet the psak still remains that one doesn't teach Torah to a Talmid She'eino Hogun. I was discussing this with somebody just a couple of days ago in connection with this week's Pashta Shavua, where Moshe Rabbeinu comes down Har Sinai and sees the Eyal and smashes the Luchas. And the question is, why did he do that? This is one of the most famous, remarkable actions on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Chazal say, Yashaker Sheshibarto, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu praised him for it. And on what basis did he decide to do that? So the Gemara in Shabbos Pei Zayin says that he learned a Kal V'chomer from Korban Pesach. If already Korban Pesach called Ben Neichal O Yochal Boi, that a mumma and apikeros isn't allowed to eat Korban Pesach, Kal V'chomer, someone who is Osek and Avodah Zarah, one shouldn't give them the Torah. And however, Tosfos there already in Pei Zayin asks the question, says, wait a minute, it's not really a proper Kal V'chomer, because maybe what Moshe Rabbeinu should have done was to give them the Torah, v'zeh machziron b'tshuva. By giving them the Torah, be machziron l'tshuva. And Tosfos doesn't give an answer to that. Tosfos really raises the question, really, about why Moshe Rabbeinu did smash the Luchas, and this is a question that I'm thinking about in this week's Pashta Shavua. Was Moshe Rabbeinu, in fact, smashing the Luchas because he judged Klal Yisrael to be a Talmid She'eino Hogun, or was it something more fundamental about the nature of the Luchas Rishonos that he felt were unsuitable to this Dor, and he needed the Luchas Shnias in order to teach them a different Torah? This is not an answer to anything. This is just a question which is in my head, which I thought I'd share with everyone in the vain hope that maybe Rabbi Hershel Schachter can cast a little bit of light on this as well. I'd like to hand over with a lot of kavod to Rabbi Hershel Schachter. We are in great anticipation, waiting to hear from you, Divrei Torah, particularly connected to that teamwork between Rabbonim and doctors, which is so crucial for daily Psak Halacha. Rabbi Hagon, Rabbi Hershel Schachter, please, we are waiting to hear your Divrei Torah.
Thank you very much. Shalom Aleichem. Good evening, everybody. About 60 years ago, when I was a student in the yeshiva in New York, it was not so easy for Jewish young men and women to be accepted to the medical schools in America for various reasons. So the Balabatim who supported Yeshiva University decided they're going to make their own medical school. So there won't be a problem of having the students admitted. So they founded Einstein Medical School. So there were many who were complaining, since when does Yeshiva need a medical school? Then it became a whole university with a whole bunch of graduate schools. But originally it was just a yeshiva with a college, with a high school. And then all of a sudden a medical school. So at that time, Rab Soloveitchik wrote, in 1 year, I think he wrote 11 Yiddish essays that were published in the Yiddish paper. And they were reprinted recently in a hardcover book. So one of the essays was in Yiddish, why does the Yeshiva University need a medical school? So he starts off by writing in his essay, the Halacha sometimes distinguishes between Lachatchila and B'di'evet. Maybe if you would ask me Lachatchila, he says I wasn't consulted. Dr. Belkin didn't consult him. If I would be consulted, maybe I would say we shouldn't have a medical school. But B'di'evet, they already have the medical school. He thinks that it's very valuable because it's important that we should have religious, learned young doctors to be able to help the Rabbanim work on Shilas, to say how serious the situation is. On Yom Kippur, you're only permitted to eat if you're a chodesh she'esh b'sakana. On Tisha B'Av, you're permitted to eat even if you're a chodesh she'ein b'sakana. And the other Taneisim, Shavasa B'Tamas, some Gedalia, Sora B'Tevis, also the same as Tisha B'Av, but a little more kal. Any pregnant woman, a nursing mother, we automatically declare as a chodesh she'ein b'sakana. On Tisha B'Av, we don't automatically declare every nursing mother, every every pregnant woman is a Chol Hashem B'Sakana. It depends how she feels. If she feels okay, then she should fast. If she's throwing up and she can't function normally, then she is a Chol Hashem B'Sakana. So until now, Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote, until now we had to rely on the secular doctors or the non-Jewish doctors. Non-Jewish doctors say it's an emergency. An emergency, so everybody should eat on Yom Kippur, everybody should eat. But we have to have B'nai Torah, learned B'nai Torah, who share the values, like the Rabbi Kimchi said, who share our values, to know how serious an emergency is. Is it a Chol She'esh B'Sakana? Is it a Chol She'ein B'Sakana? I remember I met a man many years ago. He told me he had already remarried. His first wife passed away. So he said his first wife was deathly sick with some, I forgot already, some condition. And the Rabbanim asked the doctors regarding eating on Yom Kippur, how sick is she? If she will fast, will she die? So the doctor said, no, she's not going to die if she fasts. So the Rabbanim said she has to fast on Yom Kippur. So he said he thinks there was a miscommunication. He said it's clear. His wife died months earlier than she would have otherwise died, because she fasted on Yom Kippur. It weakened her whole body. It's not only called, the doctor misunderstood the question. The doctor thought that the rabbis were asking, will she drop dead on the spot? Will she die on Yom Kippur? So the answer was, of course not. She's not going to die. But if there's a concern, if there's a suffix or a svek, that a person will die earlier than otherwise, even one day earlier than otherwise, that's also called the suffix sakana. And whenever there's any suffix sakana, you go lechumra, suffix svek, even if the roiv is, that's what it says in the Gemara, even if the odds are that the person is going to die anyway, or even if the odds are that the person is going to survive anyway, still you drive to the hospital if there's a far-fetched possibility that by being Mechal Shabbos, driving the patient to the hospital on Shabbos, or there's a far-out chance that by eating on Yom Kippur, this will extend the person's life by one day, by just an hour. That's called the suffix sakana, even though it's nowhere near 50-50. The Gemara has a pasuk in Tehillim that we recite in the davening, Shamer P'sayim Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu watches over the foolish people. So the Gemara has a comment, and they quote that pasuk in the context of that comment. If you have a suffix sakana that's nowhere near 50-50, so then let's say the odds are 95-5 that the patient is healthy. That no problem, there's no need to eat on Yom Kippur, there's no need to drive him to the hospital on Shabbos. There's a 5% chance that he may die. A 5% chance that by eating on Yom Kippur, you may save his life. By driving him to the hospital on Shabbos, he may succeed in saving his life. So then the Gemara says it depends. It's a Harab Chaim Moser has a tshuva in his sefer, and he quotes several major poskim, classical poskim, who say like this, that that depends on the patient. If the patient is nervous, if the odds are 95-5, if the patient is nervous and feels that by eating on Yom Kippur, this may save my life. So then if the patient is nervous, then we declare it as a suffix sakana, and we say he has to eat on Yom Kippur, and the other people have to drive him to the hospital. But if the patient himself is not nervous, and it's nowhere near 50-50, so then Halacha says, Shamer P'sayim Hashem. If the person is acting a little foolishly, there is a 5% chance that he will die. But if the person is acting like a pesi, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will watch over him. That's the Chasam Sofer points out. There's a Gemara in the Yavneh. The Gemara comments on the pasuk in Zois HaBracha. Moshe Rabbeinu gives a bracha to each one of the Shvatim. So he gives a bracha to Shevet Levi, and he praises Shevet Levi as Brischa Yinsoru. They observed the mitzvah Bris Milah during the 40 years of traveling in the Midbar. All of the other Shvatim didn't observe Bris Milah for all the 40 years. In Mitzrayim, right before Yetzias Mitzrayim, there was a big national Bris Milah. That many people had not had a bris milah, and whoever didn't have a bris milah wasn't permitted to participate in the Korban Pesach. And then for the 40 years of traveling in the Midbar, only the Shevet Levi observed bris milah. The other Shvatim did not. Why not? So the Gemara says the weather conditions were such that there was a slight danger in performing a bris milah, that the baby may not, the surgery may not be successful. The wound may not heal. So So the Shevet Levi ignored the suffix sakana, and the other Shvatim were concerned. So the Chasam Sofer and the Chuvas raises a question, but they had an Orthodox rabbi with them, Moshe Rabbeinu. So what does he let everybody do whatever they darn please? Either the Shevet Levi is right, he should have insisted everybody should perform the bris milah, or the other Shvatim are right, and Shevet Levi is wrong. He should have prohibited Shevet Levi from performing the bris milah. So basically, this is, the Chasam Sofer gives a complicated answer, but basically the way Rab Chaim Ozer explains the psak, this is the explanation. It wasn't the suffix sakana in the 40 years of the midbar was nowhere near 50-50. It was a very slight suffix sakana. So Shevet Levi was not nervous about it. So usually the din depends on the patient. If the patient is nervous, then it's called the patient is concerned, then we consider it suffix sakana. If the patient is not concerned, then it's not called suffix sakana. Here the patient is only 8 days old, so you can't consult the little baby. What does he think? So you have to ask the caretakers. The parents are responsible for taking care of their children. They have to make the decision. So those parents who were nervous, Shevet Levi was not nervous. They had bitochen that if they'll do the bris, the baby will survive. And the Gemara says no one ever died. Nobody from Shevet Levi died. And the other Shvatim were more nervous, so that's the din of Shamir Psam Hashem. For those who are nervous, it's considered a suffix sakana. For those who are not nervous, it's not considered a suffix sakana. The halacha says that a person is not a balabas on his own life. You have no right to take your life. That's an explicit pasuk in Chumash in the end of Parshas Noach. Achas dimchem l'nafshesechem medrash. One is not permitted to commit suicide. But yet a person is a balabas to make certain decisions on what's good for him. So take, for example, the following case that we understand better. The Gemara comments on the story that appears in Sefer Malachim. In the Tanakh, we read it as the Haftarah of Shabbos Parshas Mitzorah. There was a war going on, and Arba Mitzorahim, the Gemara has a tradition that it's Gehazi and his 3 sons. Arba Mitzorahim were not allowed to enter into Ayoras HaMakofes Chaimim in Moshe Shur ben Nun. Shomron was not Mukav Chaim Moshe Shur. Shomron was a walled city, but the wall was put up way later. It wasn't there in the days of Yeshua ben Nun, but nonetheless, it says in Tanakh like that, but nonetheless, the Malbim, I think, explains, they treated it, their practice was that they treated the city of Shomron as if it had the status of Mukav Chaima from the days of Yeshua ben Nun. So the B'tzoraim didn't enter the city. They were sitting on the outskirts of the city, and they ran out of food, and the enemy had surrounded the whole city. So they didn't know what they're going to do. If they're going to surrender to the enemy, they may shoot them on the spot. They may kill them on the spot, and they'll die earlier than otherwise. And if they don't surrender to the enemy, if they'll just stay where they are, they're going to run out of food and they're going to die from starvation. So they decided to run the risk. They don't have too much longer to live because they ran out of food. So all they have is Chayishah. Chayishah, the Rab Chaim Ozer interprets, and that's the accepted pshat. Those who disagree, but that's the accepted pshat. Chayishah means if it looks like you don't have 12 months to live. They thought for sure they're going to die within a couple of days. They're not going to live 12 months. So they were considering the possibility of surrendering to the enemy. So the enemy may kill them on the spot and they won't even live the couple of days that they have yet to live. But the enemy may take them prisoners of war and keep them alive. So they decided they're going to risk the possibility of Chayishah the next week or two that they may survive for the possibility of Chayolam. Chayolam, no one's going to live forever. Chayolam means it looks like he may survive more than 12 months. So the Gemara learns out from that pasuk that if a person is deathly sick and there's a risky procedure, a medical procedure, which he may cause him to die on the surgery, in the middle of the surgery, he may lose the Chayishah that he has, but the procedure is such that it may extend his life and he may live on for more than, the chances that he may live on for more than 12 months. So the Gemara learns out from the pasuk that it's permissible to run that risk. So in the yeshivas, they say, Pshat, what are the Gemara learning out? These were the 4 biggest Talmidei Chachamim of the generation. This was Gehazi and his 3 sons. Gehazi was Elisha's Gabbai, and he was cursed by Elisha because he acted highly improperly. He made a Chil Hashem. And that's why he and his children, he and his 3 sons were punished with the Negat Saras. What are we learning Adinim from Gehazi and his 3 sons? And the answer is, the Gemara is learning out that common sense dictates like that. If it's a reasonable position to take, then a person has a right to run that risk. We're just learning out from Tanakh that it's a reasonable choice, that it worked. They decided they're going to surrender to them, and it turned out that the enemy had run away. The enemy wasn't there anymore. And then they told all the people in the city, the enemy left, and they left all the food behind. So everybody from the city, Shambron, came out, and they all took the food. So that's the situation where it's up to the patient to make that decision. A person is not a balabas on his life. You have no right to take your life, but you have a right to determine whether under these circumstances, does it make sense to risk the Chai Shah in order to possibly gain the Chai Olam. So here as well, in this situation where you have the suffix sakana, but it's nowhere near 50-50. So the halacha says for the person who's nervous, it's considered suffix sakana. So the other 11 shvatim, all the other shvatim did not perform bris milah. They were concerned. So for them, it's called the suffix sakana. And Shevet Levi was not nervous. So for them, it's not considered a suffix sakana. There was an incident, the Chazon Ish was one and lived in Europe for many years. And then well before the Second World War, he moved to Eretz Yisrael. So then when it came to the Second World War, so the Germans surrounded Eretz Yisrael and they wanted to take over Palestine at that time, because Eretz Yisrael is the link between the 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And it's militarily, it's a significant position to have. If you control Palestine, so you have a bigger hashpah on all the 3 continents. Historically, that's when they started to lose the war. When the Germans started to bomb Eretz Yisrael, they were trying to take over. That's when they started to lose. In the end, they lost the war. So a lot of times, I remember I was a little boy in the middle of the Second World War. So I remember I lived in Pennsylvania. My family moved to New York because there was no yeshiva for me in Pennsylvania. So my parents sent me to New York to stay by my grandparents for a while, and then they moved to New York because of education. Me and my sister needed religious education. So I remember as a little boy, in Pennsylvania, they would have practice. They would run a siren at night. The Germans were nowhere near America, so they weren't ready to bomb America, but America wanted to prepare. So they would run a siren at night, because if the Germans want to drop a bomb, they didn't have radar at that time. So the only way to know where to drop the bomb is if you leave the lights on at night. So they would have it. And everyone had to turn on the lights. If the Germans come to attack, they won't know where to come. So the shaila was, every so often they would have the practice would be on a Friday night. So in the middle, and I remember sitting as a little child. I don't remember too many other things from when I was a little child. I remember the whole room was dark, and we just had the radio was on, and the radio had a green light on it. I remember the green light, and we would hear, now it's all clear, shine. We'll be out, so you can turn on the lights. So 3 times. Like this part, I don't remember. My father told me that my father was a rabbi. Father's an Orthodox rabbi. So 3 times the siren went off on Friday night. So my father didn't turn off the light. So the policeman came and he rang the bell and he said he's going to give him a penalty for not turning off the light. So my father explained, as an Orthodox rabbi, and if there would really be a suffix sakana, he certainly would turn off the lights, but it's only practice. So according to Jewish law, we're not allowed to turn off the lights. So once he got away with it, and 2 times he had to pay the penalty. But in Eretz Yisrael, it wasn't just practice. In Eretz Yisrael, when they ran the siren, when the Chazon Ish was there already, when they ran the siren, it was a real suffix sakana. So they asked the Chazon Ish the following shaila. In a little village, they don't know, Friday night, they can hear faintly the siren from a distance. Far away, they don't know where, they hear the siren. So the shaila was, is that enough of a suffix sakana that everyone in the village should have to turn out the lights? So the Chazon Ish told over a story about the Chafetz Chaim, and this in the biography of the Chazon Ish. And based on the story of the Chafetz Chaim, he passed in the shaila. He said the Chafetz Chaim once spent a day in the city Lodz. That was an industrial city, a big city in Poland. And he was receiving guests the whole day. People were asking him eitzes. They didn't ask him shilas and halacha. They were asking him eitzes. So two people came with the exact same shaila, an hour apart from each other. The shaila was, they're Shomer Shabbos, and they don't make so much money. If they would be Mechal Shabbos, if they would take a job to work 7 days a week or whatever, 6-7 days a week, they would make more money. They would be able to put away money in a savings account. And the anti-Semitism was building up, and they were concerned that day may come that there'll be so much anti-Semitism will have to run away for their lives, and they don't even have a penny in savings to be able to buy a train ticket to save their lives. So the shaila was, is that considered a suffix sakana that now there's not yet a suffix sakana? Are they permitted to be Mechal Shabbos now, to take a job, to make much more money, to put away money in their bank so that if it turns out later, they'll need the money to get a ticket, a train ticket to save their lives. So they'll have money to save. So the first Balabas asks the Shaila. So the Chafetz Chaim asks him, do you really think that that may save your life? Do you think that there's a chance? He thinks it's ridiculous. Either they're going to kill him and they're not going to, he doesn't think so. But his Chaverim are recommending that he should ask the Shaila. So he said, if you personally think that it's a joke, you don't think so, it's far-fetched. So he said, then for you, it's not called a suffix hakana. You're not allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. An hour later, another balabas came with the exact same shaila. Is he allowed to take a job now to be Mechal Shabbos, to put away money in a savings account? So the Chafetz Chaim asked him, do you really think that that may save you? And I said, yeah. He thinks that by having money, he'll be able to buy a ticket. So he said, then for you, it's called the suffix hakana. That's exactly that's the psak of Reb Chaim Oizer. That's based on the Gemara quoted that pasuk, Shem Psaim Hashem. Whenever there's a far-fetched suffix hakana, nowhere near 50-50. So the din is you don't go basar roiv. So if a person has an ingrown toenail, so also you drive to the hospital on Shabbos because it's a suffix hakana. Sometimes people die from an ingrown toenail. They get an infection and they die. But it doesn't happen. So it's so rare. So if the patient is nervous about it, if it would be in the weekdays, he wouldn't take off a day from work. On Shabbos, he doesn't go to work anyway, so then he has an ingrown toenail and wants to know, should he drive to the hospital on Shabbos? If it would be the weekdays, he wouldn't be concerned. So the din depends on the patient. The patient has to decide. If he is personally nervous, then it's called the suffix sakana. If he's not nervous, then it's not called the suffix sakana. So that's what the Chazon Ish said. If you can't say over here in the village, those who are nervous should turn off the lights, and those who are not nervous should not turn off the lights. So one person is going to lean up the lights, everyone's going to get killed. So the Chazon Ish said, if one person in the village, this faraway village, that they heard faintly the siren from a distance, if there's one person in the village who's nervous, then everybody's mechuyev to turn off the lights. That's what he told them. So you have to discuss the Rabbanim have to discuss the situation with the doctors whenever you have a case of suffix hakana. They have to find out how much, is it close to 50-50, is it nowhere near 50-50? The most common shilas that come up here in New York are end-of-life shilas. So it's interesting, after the Chazon Ish passed away, so they published a collection of letters by the Chazon Ish. So they're very interesting. Chazon Ish had his own style Hebrew, very elegant style of Hebrew. Rabbi Soloveitchik also had his own style Hebrew, totally different from everybody else. The Steipler was a brother-in-law of the Chazon Ish. He had a very rough style Hebrew, not at all the same elegant style like the Chazon Ish. So they published, after the Steipler passed away, they published a few volumes called Kraina de Igarta, letters of the Steipler. So in the first volume, they have, one of the letters goes like this. Someone asked the Steipler, he wasn't in the field, he learned Gemara and he gave shiurim, he used to give Chidush Torah. He wasn't really in the field of Psak Halacha, but they asked him in the Shaila, what's the story with end of life? Do you always extend life? So he writes back, he responds, as children, it was ingrained in us that the Jewish position always is, you always extend life under all circumstances. Then when we got a little older and we started learning Gemara, so we learned the Gemara in the Dorim, and there's a big Ran on Daf Mem, and the Ran says you don't always extend life. And sometimes you pray that the patient should die. If the patient is suffering, there's no mitzvah to extend his life. You should pray that the patient should die. There's a tshuva from one of the Sephardic Gedolim, Reb Chaim Falaji, There was a couple that was married, and the woman was suffering at the end of her life. So he said the husband should not pray that his wife should die. People will think that he never had shalom bayis. He should ask his children. They should pray that the mother should die, that the mother shouldn't suffer so much. But the husband should pray. That looks funny. Shouldn't do that. So and then not only do we allow one to pray that the patient should die, sometimes we even hasten the death a little bit. We don't permit euthanasia. We don't permit mercy killing. Rabbi Soloveitchik, whenever he would talk about euthanasia, he would always quote the Sefer Aksav HaKabbalah on Chumash, on Parshas Nech. Where does it say in the Chumash that mercy killing is not allowed? Maybe it's only not allowed to murder someone if you hate him. So he quoted the Aksav HaKabbalah, writes on the pasuk that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will punish one miyad ish achiv if a person kills his brother. What do you mean, your brother? Usually you use the term brother because it's brotherly love. So a person is not going to kill the one whom he loves. So the Ksav HaKabbalah says that's what it means. The Chacham had a tradition. Miyad ish achiv means even though he killed them out of Rahmanis, it's mercy killing, still it's a biblical prohibition. So we don't permit active euthanasia, but passive euthanasia we do allow. Let's say the person is so sick and he's suffering a lot. So I'm not allowed to kill him to hasten his death, to relieve him from his pain, but you're not mechuyev to extend his life. Just to see the neshama, to extend it, the person should live longer. The poskim in Yeridei, you say, at the end of Yeridei, you have all of the dinim of avelus, that the doctor has to treat the patient, and so on. So they have in the beginning of Hilchos Avelus, so it says once the person is already a goses, there's no mitzvah to extend life. A goses means there's a Rambam in his commentary on Mishnayos in the first parak in Ohalois, where the Mishnah says a goses is kechai, a goses is alive, he's not dead. But the Rambam says a goses, those of us who don't know Arabic use the Hebrew translation. So the Hebrew translation of the Pirush HaMishnayos, which was originally written in Arabic, so in the translation they refer to tahalich hamoves, that death is a process, has a beginning and it has an end. So when the process of death already set in, the vital organs are already all shutting down. One vital organ, another one. So you won't be able to reverse it. You'll be able to extend his life a little bit, but since the tahalich hamoves already began, so the poskim is saying there's no mitzvah to extend life. He's already in the process of dying. And even the Gemara had the Ran and the Dorim that we mentioned before in Daf Mem. The Ran quotes the Gemara in the end of Maseches Ksubis. There's an Agadita about the final days of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. It's called Ashkafta de Rebbe. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the one who edited the Mishnah, is known as Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaKodesh, and Ashkafta de Rebbe is about his passing. So the Gemara says he had a sickness, he was dying, and he was suffering pain. And there was a blacksmith, he lived in Yerushalayim, there was a blacksmith who kept on banging and making noise. And when he kept on banging and making noise, the Rebbe would keep on perking up and he wouldn't die. So Amsa de Rebbe had a maid, and she gave instructions to go tell the blacksmith to stop making noise. And when he stopped making noise, the Rebbe finally died. So the Ran quotes that Gemara that you can even hasten the death of the patient, but not bikum b'aseh. That's where Moshe Feinstein explains. People don't die because it's quiet. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't die because it was quiet. It was quiet, people don't die. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had a sickness, and he died because of the sickness that he had. But the noise of the blacksmith kept on perking him up, waking him up, so he kept on extending his life. So if you stop banging, then he's going to die earlier from his sickness. So to remove hasaras hamonea, that's passive euthanasia. You're not permitted to do active euthanasia. Let's say you're going to pull a plug on the patient. The patient needs a respirator. You're going to pull a plug so he dies from lack of oxygen. It doesn't help that you didn't touch the patient. You pulled the plug. Pulling the plug means he's going to die from lack of oxygen. But if you just don't treat the patient, you don't extend his life. You act b'shei al tasa. So then basically the halacha says that under such circumstances, it's buta. That's under such circumstances. Also, Rabbi Yankov Hendon has in his Sefer on Orach Chaim that if a person is holding by the end, person is very sick. And the doctors have a way to treat him. But let's say with chemotherapy, he'll lose his hair, he'll lose this, he'll lose the other thing. Everything is up in the air. Everything is very iffy. And the patient said, let me die in peace. I'd rather die. Don't extend. He's already 95 years old and he already saw great-grandchildren shine. He says, let me die in peace. He doesn't want the chemotherapy because it has so many negative side effects. So Rabbi Yaakov Hendon says in the later poskim quoted Halacha L'Maaseh that the patient has a right to choose that. A person is not a balabas on his life to take his life, but he's a balabas to determine whether you're doing him a favor or a disservice by extending his life. So if it's a totally unreasonable choice, let's say the Magen Avraham quotes this example. A person is 18 years old and he has gangrene in a leg and the doctors want to amputate the leg to save his life. And they'll give him a plastic leg and he'll live to the age of 120. He says, no, he'd rather die now than live with a plastic leg. And they have everything under control. They've done this hundreds of times, thousands of times. They'll have everything under control. So the Magen Avraham quotes the Tshuvas HaRadvaz that we don't give the patient the choice. You do the amputation bal korcha. He has no right to choose such a ridiculous choice. But if he's 95 years old and the result is very unknown and there are negative side effects, and if you would take a poll of 1,000 people, probably 5-10% of the population, maybe even more, would say, let me die in peace already, Shankinuk. I don't want to live on. So if it's an unreasonable choice that the person says, let me die, then you're not allowed to listen to the patient. Then it's ritzicha. But if it's a reasonable choice, then the patient has a right. That's what Moshe Feinstein writes. Whenever it's a reasonable choice, then the patient he's not a balabas to take his life, but he's balabas to determine whether they're doing him a favor or not by extending his life. Rav Soloveitchik told us that when his father took his first rabbinical position in Europe, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, so Rav Chaim Soloveitchik made him promise him with a tkiyas kaf. He made him shake hands with him that he'll follow his psak regarding eating on Yom Kippur. What is that? In Volozhin, the psak hamukubal was, this wasn't only Rab Chaim Soloveitchik, this is Rab Chaim Volozhiner. Chaim Volozhiner was a student of the Vilna Gaon. He was the one who founded the Volozhiner Yeshiva in 1802, something like that. And the yeshiva lasted for 90 years and it was closed basically by the Russian government in 1892. So Rab Chaim Volozhiner gave this psak. And it's Yodua de Rav Kook also followed that psak. Rav Kook wasn't that close with Rab Chaim. When he learned in Volozhin as a Talmud, he wasn't so close to Rab Chaim Soloveitchik. He was closer to the Netziv. But the Netziv quotes this psak in his commentary on the Shiltas. When the Netziv was a teenager, he wrote a commentary on the Shiltas. And he writes that when he came to the yeshiva in Volozhin, I think he came before his bar mitzvah to learn in Volozhin yeshiva, the author of the Nachlas David was still alive. Nachlas David, David Tebel, was later the rabbi in Minsk. He had learned by Rab Chaim Volozhin. He was one of the earliest students that they had in Volozhin yeshiva. And he said the Netziv heard from Nachlas David that this was the psak hamukubal in Volozhin from the days of Rab Chaim Volozhin, that when you have a choila on Yom Kippur, if a person is healthy, but we're afraid that if he fasts, he may get sick and he may die, or we know for sure he's healthy now, he's doing okay, but he's not so strong. And if he fasts, he will die or he may die. Then if you can save his life by eating pachas mikashir, let him eat less than a shir and wait a few minutes, less than a shir and wait a few minutes. So we recommend that. We don't tell him, we don't give him a heter to eat everything. Why? Because the Gemara says whenever you have to do Chilul Shabbos to save the patient's life, or you have to eat treifus to save the person's life. So the Gemara has the klal in the last parak in Yuma, machila mosa hakal tchila. You have to try to violate lesser isurim. So less than a shir, if you eat less than a shir Yom Kippur, it's a biblical prohibition. Chatz shir is asim in Torah. A lot of people have the mistaken attitude that whenever you don't feel well on Yom Kippur, you eat pachas mikashir. That's not true. You're only allowed to eat pachas mikashir if you have a sakana or a suffix sakana. If there's no sakana at all that the person is going to die, then there's no heter to eat even pachas mikashir. Even if he's going to get sick, You're not allowed to violate a din in the Torah because you're going to get sick. Only if you may get sick and you may die. Even if a slim chance, then even a suffix sakana you eat. So, but there's a difference, la halacha. If the person is basically healthy, he's not sick now. But if he will fast, he may get sick and he may die. So then you recommend that he should eat pachas mikashir, because to eat less than a shear, there's no curse. Even more than a shear, then there is curse. That's called machil masa hakala kalchil. You violate the lesser of the two isurim. But if the person is a choyle sheyesh b'sakana, he is deathly sick already, and he's taking chemotherapy to pull himself out of the sickness, then you don't have the restriction of pachas mikshir. Tell him to eat regular meals. This is based on a Magen Mishnah and Hilchos Shabbos. So even though the Mishnah Berurah has a long comment in his Bir Halacha and Hilchos Shabbos, he thinks we shouldn't follow this Magen Mishnah. So Rab Chaim Soloveitchik explained that all the kashas in the Mishnah Berurah were based on a misunderstanding of what the Magen Mishnah said. And truth of the matter is that the Mishnah Berurah himself writes like this in Hilchos Yom Kippur, that if the person is already a chodesh sheyesh b'sakana, then you don't tell him he should eat pachas mikshir. He himself has that psak, but most of the Rabbanim skip that line in the Mishnah Berurah. But whenever it comes up, so that's where Rab Chaim Soloveitchik insisted that his son, Rab Moshe Soloveitchik, when he took the first position of Rabbanis, he made him promise by shaking hands with a Tkiyas Kaf that he's going to paskin the way he paskin, that if the person is already a chodesh sheyesh b'sakana, we're trying to save his life, that you don't insist that he should make him crazy, that he should eat pachas mikshir. You allow him to eat regular meals. So you have to consult the Rabbanim, have to consult the doctors to find out how sick the patient is, and how close is the suffix sakana to 50-50, and so on, and so forth. Years ago, there was a famous Talmud Chacham in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Yamin Zilber. The Chazon Ish used to refer to him as Rabbi Yamin HaTzadik. So this Rabbi Yamin Zilber wrote a sefer on Hilchos Shabbos, has all the basic dinim, and he threw in a few chidushim of his own. And then people started to correspond with him. So first they corresponded on Inyanim and Hilchos Shabbos that he had in his sefer. So he responded. And then they saw the fellow knows other areas. So he corresponded on Hilchos Shmita, on Trumas HaMaasros, on davening, on everything. So he has, I think, something like 20 volumes that are called Oznid Beru. The letters back and forth, the correspondence with the Balabatim, with Talmid Chachamim, who are consulting him. So he has in his sefer the following chiddush. On Shabbos, there are 24 prakim in Mishnah Shabbos. So there's one whole parak about Harefuah b'Shabbos. The Chachamim made a prohibition that one is not permitted to take medications on Shabbos. Why? In the days of the Tanoim, it would be a common practice that the person needed the medication would have to grind up the samamanim, and that's a malacha of tochen. So they made Gzera de Rabbanan, you're not permitted to take medication, even if you prepared it before Shabbos, you're not allowed to take medication on Shabbos. Unless that's if the person is basically, in Shulchan Aruch they describe, if the person is basically healthy as a bari, but he has a slight ache and pain. What if he's a chodesh she'ein bo sakana? What if he has a condition that prevents him from functioning normally? So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, not only if he's sick, he doesn't even have to be a choyle. Let's say a baby wants his bottle. The baby is not sick. Baby wants his bottle. He has no way of communicating, so the baby starts crying. He wants his bottle. Baby's not sick. If you won't give him the bottle the next 5 minutes, the world won't come to an end. He's not going to get sick at all. But still, because the baby is not able to function normally, because baby is hungry, the baby has a condition of hunger and babyhood, babiness, whatever you call it. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Gemara Masechus Shabbos that tzorchei hatinak is considered like a chodesh she'ein b'sakana, because the baby in the condition that he is now, he's hungry, he's not able to function normally. Usually the baby plays with his toys or he fights with his siblings or whatever he usually does, and now he can't act normally for a baby. Now he's going to cry his head off. Sometimes you have older people, the people, let's say, they live 5 blocks away from the shul. So when they bought the apartment years ago, 5 blocks away from the shul was nothing. And now because they have old age, and now they can't go to shul. So that, in a certain sense, that's a chodesh she'ein b'sakana. So chodesh she'ein b'sakana, they're not sick, but they have a condition, old age, that prevents them from functioning normally. It's not because there's room to make kulas, not because of the mitzvah to daven in shul. No, he's going to go to shul, he's going to talk the whole davening, he's going to talk from Kriyas HaTorah, not going to listen to the rabbi's sermon. But he goes to shul for social activity. He has a good time. And in the weekdays, he would go by car. But because it's Shabbos and he can't walk, at old age, he can't walk, so that he has the status of a chol l'shem b'sakana. So what's the din of a chol l'shem b'sakana? One who has a condition that prevents him from functioning normally. So the accepted opinion, there are those who disagree, but the Mishnah Berurah quotes the accepted opinion is that the chol l'shem b'sakana is permitted to violate gzeirus midrabanan. There are three categories of prohibitions on Shabbos. There are malachas deraisa, malachas derabanan, and then there are things that exeris. Take, for example, you're not allowed to take medication on Shabbos because the person may grind up the medication. He may violate tochein. So what are you going to say? Whoever swallows a pill on Shabbos is in violation of tochein midrabanan. He didn't do tochein at all. It's exeris shema. Let's say you're not allowed to climb on a tree because exeris shema yachtach zmar may break off a branch. You're not allowed to ride horseback because he may break off a branch from the tree in order to hit the horse, that he should go faster. So you're going to say whoever leans on a tree is in violation of kotzer. Whoever rides horseback in violation of kotzer, it's not even a malacha midirabanan. It's exera midirabanan. So whatever is only a malacha midirabanan is lower level than a malacha deraisa, and exera derabanan is a lower level than a malacha derabanan. So in Shulchan Aruch, there are different opinions what we're allowed to do b'makam chayli. So then Rabbi Yosef Kara writes in the Shulchan Aruch, we should follow the third opinion. He quotes four opinions. He says we should follow the third opinion. Third opinion is the Ramban who makes this distinction, that if the situation is such that the person is a chayla she'ein bo sakana, then we allow all gzeiras the Rabbanan. So to take medication is only a gzeira. And let's say a goyish doctor comes and I need a prescription to be able to pick up a medication in the drugstore. So the goyish doctor doesn't have a pen with him. So he says, give me a pen and I'll fill out a prescription. So I say, I can't handle a pen. It's muktzah. It's a klisha malachta liyasa. So the doctor's going to walk out in a huff. What do you mean you can't handle a pen? So it says, Shulchan Aruch, you're permitted to handle muktzah in a case of a chol l'shem b'sakana, because muktzah is not even a malacha midirabanan. It's a gzeira midirabanan. Or let's say a person is sick, he's not well, and he needs to sleep. And if he sleeps, he'll get better. So if you play soft and he can't fall asleep, he's an insomniac, he can't fall asleep. So the Gemara says, the Gemara in Erevin, you're permitted to play soft music to have him fall asleep. Because the prohibition with the Rabbanon of playing music is Gzeira Shema Yisak and Kleshir. It's a Gzeira. You can't say one who plays the piano is in violation of Misak and Money. It's not even a Malach with Rabbanon, it's a Gzeira with Rabbanon. So whenever something is only a Gzeira with Rabbanon, so we permit it, but Makam Chaylu Shem Sakan. So you have to determine in any given situation, is the person a chayla sheyesh ba sakana? So you sakana samadas, sakana sachaim. There was an opinion that's not accepted, that if there's possible loss of a limb, that's also called loss of a life or loss of a limb, is sakana. And the Sridiesh raises the possibility maybe we should reverse the psak, since we find a few Rishonim say like that. But the pashtus is that we don't accept that opinion. Loss of a limb, the Ramban says, the Shulchan Aruch said we should follow the third opinion. The Ramban says whenever there's possible loss of a limb, you're permitted to violate all the Rabbanans, even Exera the Rabbanan. Whenever there's possible loss of life, then you're permitted to violate even a Malacha Deraisa. Whenever there's only possible loss of a limb, you're permitted to violate whatever is the Rabbanan. Whenever a person is a Chayla She'ein Bo Sakana, so you're not permitted to violate Malachas Rabbanan, you're only permitted to violate Gzeris Midirabbanan. And this distinction between a Malacha Midirabbanan and Gzer Dirabbanan carries over for eating non-kosher food also. There are different kinds of non-kosher food. So let's say you have chicken cooked in milk, that's real Basa B'chala Midirabbanan. Basa B'chala Manatar is when you have flesh cooked in milk and chicken cooked in milk. The accepted opinion in Shulchan Aruch is that's Basa B'chala Midirabbanan, that's treif Midirabbanan. So let's say a person is a Chayla She'ein Bo Sakana, and the doctor say if he'll eat the chicken cooked in milk, he will recover. So we would not allow that. The Gemara says by Chayla She'ein Bo Sakana we do give certain leniencies. So the Ran explains in the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Ran. We only allow whatever is only a gzeira midirabbanan. Let's say to get hana shalok kederach hana asam. But to drink stam yenam, outright to drink stam yenam, non-kosher food, that we don't allow. So we carry over this distinction between a malacha derabbanan versus exera derabbanan to macholas asuras also. When one is a chayla she'en bo sakana, we only allow him to eat something that's forbidden with the rabbanim mitam gzera. But if it's a real macholas asuras rabbanim, we wouldn't allow it. So the rabbanim cannot paskin the shaylas without consulting with the doctors. You have to find out, is the person a goyses, is he holding by the end? Is it 50-50? Is it nowhere near 50-50? They cannot. I know in New York, a lot of rabbanim paskin from the top of the head without consulting the doctors. They frown upon the doctors, and their psokim are all incorrect. You have to consult with the doctor. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to have a sheet of pu'ula, absolutely, between the doctors and the rabbanim. And the doctors can't just say it's an emergency, so everything is mutter. It depends how serious the emergency is. Okay, maybe we will open the floor for questions or discussion.
Thank you very much, Rosh Hashiva, for a wonderful and insightful journey through Shas and Poskim. As always, I'm taking notes, and whenever I listen to the Rosh Hashiva's shiurim, I always have to go back and review the material. So I will, we've had quite a few questions. I'll start off with Diane Kada, who wanted to ask the Rosh Hashiva a question. So Diane Kada, if you could just unmute yourself, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Rosh Hashiva, for that fantastic share. On a more broader topic, how far do we go in saying in this intersection between Chazal and Rabbonim and the medical scientific knowledge of today? How far can we go in saying that halacha can change according to the scientific knowledge of today? If things which in times of the Gemara were mutter or also based on a certain scientific understanding, which today has changed, where does that leave the position of halacha today? What's the Rav's opinion on that?
In the days of the Gemara, when a baby had a bris, they would bathe the baby with warm water before and after the bris. And if you didn't have warm water, let's say there's a bris on Shabbos, so you don't have any warm water, so you get a goy to heat up the water. What if there's no goy and you did the bris? So the Gemara says it's considered absolutely a suffix sakana, and the Jew is permitted to heat up the water, even though it's a malacha deraisa bishul, in order to bathe the baby afterwards. The Shulchan Aruch lived in the Rabbi Yosef Kara lived in the 1500s in Eretz Yisrael in Tzfat, and he writes that the conditions today are such that we don't consider that a suffix sakana at all. Even though it says in the Gemara that that's a suffix sakana, we don't consider it a suffix sakana. And the reverse, a lot of things that in the days of the Gemara, they didn't know what this is. And today we know it's a suffix sakana. So you have to go according to the doctors of your generation. The Chasam Sofer writes in one of his tshuvas, this is not a hidden tshuva, this tshuva is quoted by the Pischei Tshuva in the end of Yeredeya in Hilchas Roifim. So the Chasam Sofer writes in the tshuva that Tanoim didn't have traditions of Moshe Messina about medication. They relied on the Goyish doctors of their generation. And the Rambam and the Chasam Sofer writes in a different tshuva, also quoted in Pischei Tshuva, that the Rambam left out some of the medical statements in the Gemara because the Rambam was a doctor, and based on the medicine of his generation, he knew that it's not so. So we should follow in the footsteps of the Tanaim. We should always follow the doctors of your generation. Just like the Tanaim and Amoraim followed the doctors of their generation, the Goyish doctors of their generation. You have to follow the doctors of your generation. In the Shmir Shabbos Kelchasa, he writes, we only follow the doctors of our generation if they contradict what it says in the Gemara in one direction. If in the Gemara it's not considered a sakana, and today the doctors say it is sakana, so that's a suffix sakana, so you have to be Mechal Shabbos. But if it says in the Gemara that it is a suffix sakana, and our doctors say that it's not, we should still be Mechal Shabbos. I don't know where he got it from. It's against the Shulchan Aruch. It says b'ferish. In the days of the Gemara, they would cook the water on Shabbos if the baby had a bris, and they didn't have any warm water. That's considered a suffix sakana to bathe the baby to prevent infection. And the Shulchan Aruch writes this before they had the antibiotics. Shulchan Aruch lived before the antibiotics. Mechaber writes in the Shulchan Aruch that today we don't do that. So the Shulchan Aruch says you follow the doctors of your generation, bein lahakol, bein lahachmir, just like the Tanaim follow the doctors of their generation. Medicine keeps on advancing in every generation. If you practice medicine now the way they did 5 years ago, they'll probably take away your license. They'll consider you a meshugana. Medicine keeps on advancing. Every couple of years, they discovered that everything we did until now is completely incorrect.
Thank you very much, Roshiva. And another question we had is, what are the gedarim for mental health? How do we, in halacha, how do we decide when it comes to queries that arise with mental health patients? And are there differences? Do we equate physical health and mental health or not?
We have a meaning that we don't have flesh or wine in the 9 days. So I think the Rabbi Kiva, unless a person is a chayla, so then he's allowed, it's only a minig, not to have flesh and wine is a minig. So if you have a slight tzorech, in order to allow a din derabanan, if you're a chayla shem b'sakana, sometimes we're mekel. But if it's only a minig, you don't even have to be a chayla shem b'sakana. Let's say this Pischei Tshuva, Hilchos Basa B'chalav writes that we wait 6 hours in between fleishiks and milchiks. So years ago, if a person had ulcers, so the minig was that they would drink warm milk. So let's say a person, I think now they've realized that the warm milk is all baloney and they have other treatments for ulcers. So years ago, the practice was, so what if the person is fleshig and he has an ulcer attack, is he allowed to drink warm milk? So the Chassam Sofer says, in the first hour after having fleshiks that you shouldn't have milchiks, that may be a din derabanan. But the next 5 hours, to wait till 6 hours later, that's only a minhag. It's an old minhag from the days of the Gemara. But he said that's only a minhag. So in order to allow a minhag, you don't even have to be a chayil l'shem sakana. If there's a mechesh b'alma, if he has slight ache and pain, it's already permissible to violate a minhag. To eat, to have milchiks within the first hour, he thinks then you would have to be a chayil l'shem sakana to allow that. If the pain is so great that it prevents him from functioning normally. So again, so in the Shulchan Aruch, they say to have basa b'yayin in the 9 days if the person is if he's weak. It's only a minig not to have basa b'yayin in the 9 days. So if the person is weak, so it's mutter. So Rabbi Kiveger quotes from the poskim there, what if a person lost his seichel and he's recovering, and they feel that by having flesh, it could be that it's totally irrelevant today, but that's how they thought years ago. Rabbi Kiveger lived a long time ago. So Rabbi Kiveger quotes from the poskim, if they feel that by having flesh, this will help him recover to regain his health, so we would allow him to have flesh in the 9 days. So Rab Soloveitchik added, when we learned that din in Shulchan Aruch, Rab Soloveitchik used to give shurim on Shulchan Aruch also, not just on Gemara. And he would show us how he thinks he should paskin shaylos on Yeridea and Ebenezer and other parts of Shulchan Aruch as well. So he said in the name of his grandfather, Rab Chaim Soloveitchik, that if a person is meshugah, to save a person from, so Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva, to save a person from being meshugah, you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos if there's a suffix that he may lose his life when he's meshugah. He may walk next to the river and fall in, or he may not realize what he's doing, and he may take his life. But if there's no just, he's going to be meshugah, he'll just lay in bed the whole day and he won't function. So Rav Moshe Feinstein feels that that's not called pikuach nefesh. Rab Soloveitchik said the name of his grandfather Rab Chaim that he felt that if the person's going to be a shaita, mamish ala bardas, that's considered pikuach nefesh, even though his life is not in danger. He's going to be a meshugah, so that's considered like mothers. So that's considered pikuach nefesh mamish. Sometimes halacha l'maisa.
Thank you. One more question from Harav Yehuda Finches of Yerushalayim. Rav Finches, if you just unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Rosh Yeshiva. And I would like to ask for Rosh Yeshiva, what advice should be given to a doctor who's in a situation where it's clearly not a chayasha situation and the person does not want to take his medications? Should they try and encourage him to take it, speak to the family, speak to the doctor? What should they do in that situation where it's clear that al pi halacha, they should be taking a medication or whatever necessary?
Sure, you should encourage the person to take the medication. Avada, yeah. Unless there's so much side effect that the patient feels that it's not worth it, and it's a reasonable choice. But often it won't be reasonable. It's a reasonable choice.
If it's not reasonable and he won't listen, do they need to now go out of the way to speak to family members and other people to discuss with them and trying to influence them?
Sure, they should, because the person is committing suicide. If the choice that he's making not to take his medication is unreasonable, if you would consult 1,000 people, 999 would say that's ridiculous. Everyone would say take the medication and lead a normal life. He finds it annoying to take medication. So then the din is you do it bal korchai. He has no choice. The patient has no choice to choose something that's totally unreasonable. So they should try to get the family to pressure him.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Rosh Hashiva. One final question. We managed to avoid COVID throughout the Shia. And the Rosh Hashiva, there was a video of the Rosh Hashiva making a bracha on the COVID vaccine, and just wanted to clarify whether this is something that one can do to make a bracha on the COVID vaccine with Shem Malchus, or depends on the individual psak.
The din is that the Gemara has a din. If I own a field b'shutvis with another person and we need rain, and it finally rains, so since the rain is a hatova that it's shared with someone else, so then you say the bracha tova meit. When I hear the good news that it's raining after a drought, so then you say the bracha tova meit. If I have my own field and my next door neighbor has his own field, so when it rains, it doesn't rain on the whole continent. It doesn't rain on the whole world. It rains ad kan, it doesn't rain weiter. So the rain on my field, that's one hatova. The rain on his field is separate hatova. Could it rain on his field without raining on mine? Could it rain on mine without raining on his? So then you don't say hatova meitiv. Hatova meitiv is only when the hatova is shared by others. So I thought originally when they announced that the government approved the vaccine that is going to solve the problem, I thought we should really say the bracha hatova meitiv. It's good news for everybody. We're all sharing in the good news. But then I figured, why should I say hatova meitiv now? The din is when, let's say, a boy gets engaged to a girl. So he gives her a ring. He gives an engagement ring. So the girl is thrilled that she got the ring, and the boy is thrilled that she accepted his proposal. So the din is that they both have a chiyuv to say hatova meitiv. They don't have to both say. So either he says and she'll say amen, or she'll say and he'll say amen. Okay, somebody should say hatova meitiv, but they both have a chiyuv because they share together in the same thing. So I figured, and instead of saying when I hear the good news that it's good for me, it's good for everybody, everybody's going to get this vaccination. So I figured I'll wait till I get the matana. So when they gave me the first shot, so I said the bracha tova meitiv. I said with the Shem Hashem. I thought that's like everybody's sharing the same hatova. The good news that they developed the vaccine is shared. The hatova is for everybody. The same vaccine everyone's going to get. And I thought that instead of saying the bracha, when I hear the good news, Shmos Tovos, I thought I'll wait till I actually get something. Then I took the vaccine that you have to take 2 shots. So I didn't say bracha when I got the second shot. I thought that's a hemshech of the first shot.
Thank you very much. Thank you again to the Rosh Hashiva. It's been an absolute treat for us. It's been 2 years since we had the Rosh Hashiva in the UK. The last time the Rosh Hashiva was here was 2 years ago. And I remember spending time with the Rosh Hashiva. And we look forward to hosting the Rosh Hashiva in person in London, Bezrat Hashem, very soon. I want to thank Rabbi Dr. Chimchi and everyone else, all the other communities who've joined in this special shiur. And we look forward to inviting everyone and being together for our first annual conference in person of Torat Harefuah, whenever that will be. And thank you again. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the Rosh Hashiva. Thank you. Shkoyach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you very much.
Hi, darling.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Baruch Tiyeh.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Beautiful shir. Thank you very much.
What?